Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather not just to speak but to ignite a movement. The title before us, Breaking Chains, Building Nations, is not merely a phrase, it is a call to action, a declaration, a vision of a world unbound by oppression, inequality, and fear. Breaking chains begins with truth. Chains come in many forms: mental chains, systemic chains, generational chains. They are forged in silence, in ignorance, and in fear. But truth is the hammer that shatters every lie. When we awaken to who we are, when we speak our truth, we begin to break the chains. When we hear the word chains, our minds often picture iron shackles, prison bars, or locked doors. But some of the most powerful and devastating chains are the ones we cannot see. These are the invisible chains: mental, emotional, generational, and systemic. They don't clang when they move. They don't rust or break on their own. But they are just as real and often even more damaging. There are mental chains formed by years of being told we're not enough. They sound like self-doubt, low self-esteem, and the voice in our head that says, "You can't, you're not worthy," or "people like you never make it." These chains keep dreams locked away and creativity stifled. They make people settle for survival instead of striving for greatness. Then there are emotional chains, the weight of past trauma, pain, and betrayal. These are the unhealed wounds passed down from one generation to the next. Hurt people, and unless we recognize and confront the pain, it becomes a prison of anger, distrust, and fear. Generational chains are passed through bloodlines and culture. These are the patterns, habits, and limitations that seem to run in families: cycles of poverty, addiction, broken homes, or limited beliefs. You may not have chosen the chains, but you've inherited them. And until someone decides to break the cycle, those chains keep repeating. And then there are systemic chains, the ones built into the very structures of our societies. These are the chains of inequality, discrimination, and exclusion. They exist in our schools, our governments, our workplaces. They deny people opportunities not because of their ability, but because of their identity, because of the color of their skin, their gender, their background, or their economic status. Recognizing these chains is not about blame, it's about awareness. Because you can't break what you won't face. And too many people are living in chains they don't even know they carry. To break chains, we must first acknowledge them. We must be willing to look in the mirror and ask the hard questions. What beliefs have I accepted that are holding me back? What patterns have I inherited that I need to confront? What systems am I part of that need to be challenged? Breaking chains starts from within, but its impact ripples outward. It begins with the courage to say, "This ends with me." These chains stop here. Oppression thrives in darkness. It feeds off silence, distortion, and the rewriting of reality. From the earliest days of history, those who sought to control others have done so not just with chains and weapons, but with lies. Lies about who we are, lies about what we deserve, lies about our history, our worth, and our future. That's why truth is revolutionary. It is the first weapon we must pick up when we choose to rise. Truth is not always easy to speak or hear. It challenges comfort. It threatens power. It exposes what oppression tries desperately to hide, that the systems built to hold us down are often more fragile than they seem once truth is spoken into them. When we begin to name what is happening, racism, injustice, inequality, abuse, we start the process of dismantling it. Silence allows injustice to blend in, to normalize itself. But truth puts a spotlight on it. Truth is disruptive. Truth shakes foundations. The truth is that many people are not free, not because they are incapable, not because they are unworthy, but because the world has been structured to keep them in place. The truth is that entire histories have been erased, rewritten, or silenced to benefit those in power. The truth is that some wounds we carry are not ours, but are the result of centuries of oppression passed down, hidden under the label of tradition or normalcy. But truth doesn't only expose what's wrong, it also awakens what's right. It reminds people of their value. It restores dignity. It revives identity. When someone speaks their truth loudly, unapologetically, it becomes a spark. That spark can light a fire in others. It empowers people to stand up, to ask questions, to challenge the status quo. It creates a ripple effect where more and more voices rise up not in chaos, but in clarity, in truth. And here's something the oppressors fear most: a generation that is informed, aware, and unafraid to speak. Because truth removes the blindfold. And once a person sees clearly, they can never go back to being controlled. So we must become truth tellers, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs us, even when our voices shake. Because before chains are broken on the outside, they must first be broken on the inside, and truth is the tool that strikes the first blow. Oppression thrives in darkness. It feeds off silence, distortion, and the rewriting of reality. From the earliest days of history, those who sought to control others have done so not just with chains and weapons, but with lies. Lies about who we are, lies about what we deserve, lies about our history, our worth, and our future. That's why truth is revolutionary. It is the first weapon we must pick up when we choose to rise. Truth is not always easy to speak or hear. It challenges comfort. It threatens power. It exposes what oppression tries desperately to hide, that the systems built to hold us down are often more fragile than they seem once truth is spoken into them. When we begin to name what is happening — racism, injustice, inequality, abuse — we start the process of dismantling it. Silence allows injustice to blend in, to normalize itself. But truth puts a spotlight on it. Truth is disruptive. Truth shakes foundations. The truth is that many people are not free, not because they are incapable, not because they are unworthy, but because the world has been structured to keep them in place. The truth is that entire histories have been erased, rewritten, or silenced to benefit those in power. The truth is that some wounds we carry are not ours, but are the result of centuries of oppression passed down, hidden under the label of tradition or normalcy. But truth doesn't only expose what's wrong, it also awakens what's right. It reminds people of their value. It restores dignity. It revives identity. When someone speaks their truth loudly, unapologetically, it becomes a spark. That spark can light a fire in others. It empowers people to stand up, to ask questions, to challenge the status quo. It creates a ripple effect where more and more voices rise up not in chaos, but in clarity, in truth. And here's something the oppressors fear most: a generation that is informed, aware, and unafraid to speak. Because truth removes the blindfold. And once a person sees clearly, they can never go back to being controlled. So we must become truth tellers, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs us, even when our voices shake. Because before chains are broken on the outside, they must first be broken on the inside, and truth is the tool that strikes the first blow. Absolutely. Here's an expanded and compelling version of key point 3. Freedom alone is not enough. 3. Freedom alone is not enough. True freedom is a powerful word. It stirs emotion. It sparks movements. It gives hope. But freedom by itself is not the finish line, it is the starting point. Because what we do with our freedom determines whether we create a legacy or simply escape a cage. History has shown us time and again that people can be freed from physical bondage yet remain mentally imprisoned. Chains may fall from the wrists, but if they remain in the mind, true liberation has not yet been achieved. So many have fought, bled, and even died for freedom, but once that freedom was gained, the question became, now what? What happens after the doors open? What happens after the enemy flees? What happens once the revolution is won? Freedom without purpose leads to wandering, not progress. Without vision, the newly free can become lost, divided, or even vulnerable to new chains that look different but feel the same. This is why the struggle for justice cannot end at the moment of victory. That moment is just the beginning of a far greater task, a task of building. We must build systems that empower, not just dismantle those that oppress. We must build communities that heal, not just tear down the ones that hurt us. We must build leaders who serve, not those who seek to dominate. Because freedom with no direction can easily become chaos, and chaos is often used as an excuse to rebuild old chains in a new form. Freedom demands responsibility. It calls for stewardship. It asks, what kind of world will you create now that the cage is gone? It's not enough to break free, we must know why we wanted freedom in the first place. When people fight for freedom only to fall into division, selfish ambition, or apathy, the chains may change shape but remain just as tight. That's why freedom must be tied to purpose. Freedom must be guided by vision. Freedom must be anchored values. Ask any great nation, any powerful movement, any lasting revolution, they didn't just gain freedom. They built something with it. They wrote constitutions, built schools, formed communities, raised up leaders, taught their children, planted seeds for generations to come. Because freedom alone is not the goal. The goal is a future worth living in. A future that's better, stronger, and wiser than what came before. When we hear the word nation, we often think of borders, flags, governments, and constitutions. We picture maps and monuments, buildings and budgets. But a nation is not made of land or laws alone. At its core, a nation is its people. Without people, a nation is just an empty space. It is the heartbeats, the stories, the sweat, and the sacrifices of its people that bring a nation to life. Nation building is not reserved for politicians or presidents. It is not a task limited to boardrooms or ballot boxes. Nation building starts in everyday places, around dinner tables, inside classrooms, on street corners, in community centers, and in the minds of those who dare to dream of something better. Every strong nation in history was shaped not just by its leaders, but by its ordinary citizens who chose to believe in something bigger than themselves. People who chose to build instead of break, to unite instead of divide, to sow seeds they might never see bloom but planted them anyway for the sake of the next generation. A nation built on people must be built with trust, equity, and opportunity. Because when people are empowered, educated, and equipped, they become architects of change. But when people are ignored, oppressed, or silenced, even the strongest structures will eventually collapse from within. Nation building begins when people are seen, when their stories are told, when their potential is believed in not just by outsiders, but by themselves. It starts when a young girl is told her voice matters, when a boy from a broken home believes he can rise, when elders pass down wisdom instead of wounds, when communities gather not just to mourn loss, but to celebrate life and to plan for the future. The strength of a nation is in its unity, not its uniformity. It thrives when diversity is not just tolerated but celebrated, when every voice, regardless of background, is valued as part of the chorus that defines a people. No one gets left behind. No one is too small to matter. Because the future is not built by a few at the top, it is shaped by the choices and contributions of many. Real nation building asks each person, what are you building today? Are you building peace or conflict? Hope or despair? Walls or bridges? Because every word you speak, every action you take, every life you touch is either constructing the future or allowing it to crumble. The most powerful nations are not those with the biggest armies or the tallest buildings. They are the ones whose people are united in purpose, rooted in justice, and driven by hope. They rise together. They fall together. They rebuild together. Pain by itself can be paralyzing. It can silence voices, break spirits, and bury dreams. But when pain is met with purpose, when suffering is transformed into a mission, it becomes one of the most unstoppable forces on earth. Everyone carries pain, the pain of rejection, the pain of poverty, the pain of discrimination, abandonment, loss, or trauma. For some, pain is inherited, passed down through generations like an unwanted legacy. For others, it arrives suddenly, shaking the foundation of everything they thought was secure. But pain doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of something sacred, because buried inside pain is a message, and hidden inside that message is power. Purpose is what gives pain direction. It takes what was meant to destroy you and uses it to build something greater than you. It says, I didn't go through all this for nothing. It says, my story matters, and I will use it to light the path for someone else. When people find their purpose in their pain, they stop being victims and become visionaries. The abused survivor becomes an advocate. The abandoned child becomes a mentor. The one who was silenced becomes the voice for the voiceless. And through that transformation, not only are they healed, but they begin to heal others. Purpose does not erase pain, but it redeems it. It brings meaning to the moments that once seemed unbearable. It gives you a reason to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep believing. And in a world that often tells the hurting to stay quiet, choosing to turn pain into purpose is a revolutionary act. Communities have been shaped by this power. Nations have been rebuilt from rubble because people dare to rise out of the ashes and say, this suffering will not be wasted. Purpose lifts pain out of the personal and places it into the collective. It allows one person's wounds to become the wisdom of a generation. It turns breakdowns into breakthroughs. It transforms loss into legacy. It moves us from why did this happen to me to what can I build because of it. And here's the truth. Pain can either harden you or ignite you. It can make you bitter or it can make you bold. When you discover your purpose in the very thing that hurt you, the pain loses its power to define you and instead begins to fuel your destiny. Many people think legacy is something you receive, a last name, a fortune, a position, a story told by someone else. But true legacy, the kind that echoes through generations, is not something you inherit. It is something you build. Legacy is not measured by what you leave in your bank account, but by what you leave in the hearts and minds of others. It is not found in titles or trophies, but in the impact you have on people's lives. It's in the child who dreams bigger because you believed in them. It's in the community that thrives because you chose to plant seeds instead of walk away. It's in the truth you told, the pain you healed, the chain you broke not for applause, but for the future. See, inheritance fades, money runs out, buildings crumble, but a legacy built on purpose, justice, truth, and love, that outlives you. That becomes your voice when you're no longer here to speak. That becomes the torch others pick up when your journey ends. Building legacy requires intention. It doesn't happen by accident. It takes work, sacrifice, and a clear sense of who you are and what you stand for. It means choosing the harder path when it's the right one. It means making decisions today with tomorrow in mind. It means planting trees whose shade you may never sit under, but knowing that someone else will. And here's the truth, every action is a brick. Every word, every moment, every act of courage or compassion is a building block in the structure of your legacy. The question is not whether you're building one, the question is what kind are you building? Will it be a legacy of silence or a legacy of speaking truth? A legacy of fear or a legacy of faith? A legacy of self-preservation or one of selfless service? The world is full of stories of people who had everything passed down to them but built nothing. And it's also full of those who were given nothing yet built empires of change, hope, and strength with bare hands and unshakable will. Legacy is not about what you start with, it's about what you choose to create. You may come from brokenness, but you can build wholeness. You may come from silence, but you can build a voice. You may come from chains, but you can build freedom for yourself and for generations to come. Every generation is born into a story already in motion. We inherit the victories and the wounds of those who came before us. We walk into systems we did not design, into histories we did not write, but we are not powerless within them. In fact, we are the editors of what comes next. And this generation, your generation, stands at a crossroads where responsibility meets power. We are the most connected, the most informed, the most resourced generation in human history. We have access to information that was once locked away. We have platforms that carry our voices across oceans. We have technologies that can build bridges between people and ideas like never before. But with that power comes a sacred responsibility not to simply consume, but to contribute. Not to just scroll, but to stand. Not to just observe injustice, but to oppose it with action. We cannot afford the luxury of indifference. Too many lives have been sacrificed for us to stand idle. Too many doors have been opened for us to sit back in comfort. Freedom was paid for. Opportunities were fought for. Platforms were built on the backs of dreamers and warriors who never got to see the future they hoped for but believed in it enough to make room for us. Now the torch has been passed, and what we do with it determines the future not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come. Will we light the way, or will we let it burn out in our hands? Responsibility means we no longer get to say, "It's not my problem." If a child goes hungry, it is our problem. If injustice festers in our systems, it is our problem. If hatred continues to spread, division continues to grow, and truth continues to be silenced, it is our problem. Because silence in the face of injustice is its own form of consent. But here's the beauty of this generation. We are no longer waiting for permission. We are not waiting for someone else to fix it. We are not waiting to be older, richer, or more qualified. We are rising now, and the world is watching. From classrooms to courtrooms, from stages to social media, from protests to policies, this generation is showing up with boldness, with compassion, with clarity. We are rewriting the rules. We are challenging the systems. We are building tables instead of begging for seats at someone else's. Yes, the responsibility is heavy, but so is the power we hold. And if we carry both with courage, if we lean into the discomfort, if we stay rooted in truth and driven by purpose, then we won't just witness change, we will become IT. And so, my friends, the time is now. We stand on the shoulders of those who fought before us, and we have a choice to honor their sacrifices by carrying their torch forward, or to let their work fade into history. We are the generation that can break the chains of the past and build a future that's brighter, fairer, and more just. We are the dreamers, the doers, the builders of nations, not in distant lands, but in the communities we inhabit, in the hearts we touch, and in the lives we change. Let us choose purpose over complacency, unity over division, hope over despair, and action over waiting. Together we will rise. Together we will break the chains. Together we will build the nations we deserve. The power is within us. The responsibility is ours. And with truth, courage, and love as our guide, there is nothing we cannot achieve. Thank you.